And once you get a bunch of objects made, you'll see that well, your scene can get pretty heavy, and you can make you can make really complex scenes with just those primitives. Virtually everything in here is made up of just a primitive, like we've been talking about. So you can see that when you have a bunch of things in here in the wireframe, 3D Studio is about the most colorful 3D application out there, because what happens is, let's create a new primitive, or create another spiral staircase. I happen to like these spiral staircases, so I'm going to make that spiral staircase like so. And then you see that when you make new objects, what it does is it gives those new objects a color, and it's based on this here, this color chip next to the name. You can change this at any time, this object color. You can change it to whatever you want it to be, and until you assign a material to this thing, it will render this color. When you end up assigning a material to this thing, it will no longer, this color has nothing to do with anything. It's just the color in this view, which is the wireframe view. And these wireframes are one of the most basic ways to visualize objects in a 3D application. It draws them just the edges, the polygons, and the points. But that can be, it can get a little bit confusing to look at things in this way. And it's definitely not the prettiest. Now, another thing that I love about 3D Studio Max is it's awesome at displaying a shaded, textured view. So actually, a lot of these objects that I've got in here are already textured. So if I just go over and I click Smooth plus Highlights, I'm displaying some of the textures that I've made in here. Now in 3D Studio, you can draw an object wherever you want it, and so you could work entirely in that way, but likely you're not going to. The next most basic thing to 3D applications after drawing and creating the geometry like this is moving it around, moving, rotating, and scaling it. These are called transformations, and those are the most basic things that you can do to an object once you have it made. And so here next to your select, various types of select stuff, you have these very basic transformations and a couple of buttons and combo boxes here that apply to them. So one of the most basic ones is obviously Move. So I'm going to click the Move button here, and you can see it's called Select and Move. That means if I'm in that mode, I can pick something as well. I don't actually have to go back to pick it, and then move. And all of these toolbar buttons are that way. Select and Move, Select and Rotate, and Select and Scale. So if I want to select and move this spiral staircase, I can just pick it and start moving it around. Before we start moving it, what you need to be aware of is this little thing called a manipulator, and this manipulator is what allows me to move it around, and that manipulator is where any of these operations are going to take place from, but also allows me to move them in certain ways. Like you see, as I mouse around over this, it turns yellow in various ways. It turns yellow if I hover over this little blue axis. That's a Z axis, and so it corresponds to Z here. Y, X, same, Y and X corresponding to those. So I can move it just in one direction or another, Z, Y, X. But I can also move it in two directions at once by clicking on one of these three little planes. So I can click and move in X and Z at the same time, or I can click and move in Y and Z at the same time, or in the case of the spiral staircase, what becomes really handy to be able to do is to move it in X and Y at the same time. So I hold over that plane, and then I can move it along this natural ground plane that we have. So I could move it into place over here or wherever I wanted it.